I've spent my whole life as a scientist trying to understand how nature actually works, not how I want it to work, not how it would be philosophically nice if it worked, but how it really works. And what I've learned is that you have to be willing to look at things exactly as they are. And when I look at hope, I see something that doesn't match up with reality. Let's start with a basic problem. What is hope really? Hope is when you imagine something nice happening in the future, and then you believe it's going to happen. You feel good about it right now because you're thinking about this future thing. You see the problem? You're making yourself feel good today based on something that hasn't happened and may never happen. You're trading your actual present experience for an imaginary future experience. That seems backwards to me. Think about it this way. Suppose I tell you, I hope it's going to be sunny tomorrow. Well, what does that do? It makes me feel a little bit better right now, but it doesn't make it sunny tomorrow. The weather doesn't care what I hope. The weather is going to do what the physics of the atmosphere makes it do. My hope has absolutely zero effect on the actual outcome. So what I've really done is fooled myself into feeling good about something I have no control over. Now, this is where I think most people get confused about hope. They think hope somehow connects them to the future. Like if you hope hard enough, maybe you can influence what happens. But that's not how the world works. I can't hope an experiment into giving me a different result if I've done it wrong. The experiment will tell me the truth, whether I like it or not. The universe doesn't negotiate. Let me tell you about something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, the difference between hope and actually doing something. People often say, well, Richard, I hope things will get better. I hope we solve climate change. I hope we find a cure for disease. And I always want to ask them, what are you doing about it? Because hope is passive. Hope is something you feel. It doesn't require you to do anything. You can sit on your couch, hope that everything works out, and feel like you've contributed something. But you haven't. See, this is the real problem with hope. It gives you a false sense that you've already done something just by wishing for it. It's like a kind of mental trick we play on ourselves. The ancient Greeks understood this better than we do. In their mythology, hope was the last thing to come out of Pandora's box, after all the evils of the world had already escaped. And they didn't think of hope as a good thing. They thought of it as another evil. It kept people stuck in misery, always waiting for something better, always postponing their actual life. And I think there's something really true in that observation. When you're always hoping that things will get better in the future, you're not actually living right now. Your real life is happening today. Your real experience is this moment. But if you're hoping for something else, you're essentially saying, this moment is not good enough. I'm not going to pay attention to what's actually happening right now because I'm imagining something better that might happen later. And then that later moment comes, and you do the same thing all over again. You're always disappointed because you're always comparing your actual experience to an imaginary better one. Let me give you an example from my own life. I could have spent my career hoping to win a Nobel Prize. I could have been thinking about how good that would feel, how it would validate all my work, how it would make me happy. And then I probably wouldn't have done my best work because I'd be thinking about the prize instead of thinking about the physics. But instead, what I did was I just tried to understand the problems that interested me. I tried to work them out from first principles. I tried to find elegant solutions. I wasn't hoping for anything. I was doing something. And it turned out that doing good work sometimes results in recognition. But the recognition wasn't what I was after. The work was what I was after. This is crucial, and I want you to really understand this point. When people talk about hope, they're usually confusing it with something else entirely. They're confusing it with having a goal or wanting to improve something. But hope isn't the same as that. Hope is passive. Hope is a feeling. Having a goal is active. Having a goal means you've actually made a decision about what you want to do, and you're going to do it. Now, let's talk about what actually happens in the world when things improve. When we solve a problem, when we go from having a disease that kills people to having a cure, is that the result of hope? No, it's the result of scientists working incredibly hard, failing 1,000 times, trying different approaches, learning from mistakes, and eventually finding something that works. It's work. It's discipline. It's curiosity. It's the willingness to be wrong and to learn from being wrong. Hope has nothing to do with it. Actually, if you think about it, too much hope could be harmful. If a researcher says, I hope this drug works, and doesn't bother to actually test it carefully, to look for side effects, to be honest about what the data shows, well then, their hope has actually made things worse. What we need is doubt. We need skepticism. We need to be willing to say, I don't know if this will work, and I'm going to test it carefully to find out. I believe in the value of doubt. I really do. Doubt has been the engine of all human progress. Doubt is what made science possible. You see, for most of human history, people had certainty. They were certain about what God wanted. They were certain about how the universe worked. They were certain about social hierarchies. And nothing changed. Nothing improved because people weren't questioning anything. Then some people started saying, "Wait, I'm not sure about this. Let me look at it more carefully." And that uncertainty, that doubt, that was revolutionary. That's when we made progress. And here's the thing about doubt that's so important. Doubt is the opposite of hope in a way. When you doubt something, you're saying, "I'm not going to assume this is true. I'm going to investigate it. I'm going to look at the evidence." And that means you stay present with what's actually happening. You're not imagining some better future. You're looking at what's real right now. Let me tell you about something else that bothers me about hope. Hope is often used to make people feel better about injustice. Someone is suffering, something bad is happening, and we tell them, "Don't worry, have hope. Things will get better." But things won't get better just because they hope. Things will only get better if someone actually does something about the problem. And if we just tell people to hope instead of helping them to act, then we're actually making things worse. We're keeping them passive. We're telling them to wait instead of to fight. This is a very practical matter. If your house is on fire, you don't hope that the fire will go out on its own. You call the fire department. You get water. You take action. Hope is useless. Action is what matters. And yet, we've built a whole culture around hope. We have hope as this virtuous thing that people are supposed to have. But I think what we really need is for people to ask questions. Why is my house on fire? What am I going to do about it? What resources do I have? Who can help me? Those are real questions. Those connect you to actual reality. Now, I want to be careful here because I don't want you to think I'm saying we should all be depressed and cynical. That's not what I mean at all. But I think we should be clear about what's actually going to help us and what's just a comfortable feeling. Let me tell you what I think is actually valuable. I think it's valuable to be curious about the world. I think it's valuable to ask questions. I think it's valuable to work hard on things that matter to you. I think it's valuable to be honest, especially honest with yourself about what you know and what you don't know. And I think it's valuable to understand that even though we don't have certainty about the future, we can still take action. We can still improve things. Here's something I've said before, and I think it applies here. We are at the very beginning of time for the human race. It is not unreasonable that we grapple with problems, but there are tens of thousands of years in the future. Our responsibility is to do what we can, learn what we can, improve the solutions, and pass them on. It is our responsibility to leave the people of the future a free hand. That's not hope. That's responsibility. That's recognizing that you have some power, limited power, yes, but real power to affect the world. You can do something. Maybe that something is small. Maybe it's not going to solve everything, but it's real. It actually connects to actual reality, not imaginary reality. Let me talk about uncertainty for a moment, because this is important. You see, as a scientist, I've learned to live with uncertainty. I don't know exactly what's going to happen when I do an experiment. There are always things I don't understand. There are always surprises. And this doesn't frighten me. In fact, I find it much more interesting to live with uncertainty than to have false certainty. Because when you acknowledge that you don't know something, then you have a chance to learn it. When you pretend to know something you don't actually know, you block yourself from learning. This is true about the future as well. The future is uncertain. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. But instead of hoping for one particular outcome, I think it's more honest and more useful to acknowledge the uncertainty and ask, what can I actually do? What information do I have? What are my actual options? And then make decisions based on that. You know what's interesting? Sometimes when you stop hoping for a particular outcome, when you stop imagining how you want the future to be, you actually open yourself up to better possibilities. You're more creative. You're more flexible. You're not locked into one vision of how things should be. You can see what's actually there and respond to it appropriately. I've noticed that some of the most effective people I know are not hope-filled optimists. Some of them are actually quite pessimistic about how people behave and what society will do. But they're not paralyzed by that pessimism. Instead, they say, okay, if things are likely to go wrong, what do I need to do to make sure I understand the dangers? What do I need to do to protect people? What do I need to do to move things in a slightly better direction? That's not hope. That's clear thinking. That's dealing with reality. Let me give you another example. There are scientists who spend their whole careers trying to understand and prevent diseases. Some of them might hope for a cure, but the ones who actually find the cure are not the ones sitting around hoping. They're the ones in the lab working hard, failing repeatedly, learning from failures, and then trying again. They're driven by curiosity and the discipline to do real work. Hope has nothing to do with it. Actually, I think hope might even be a distraction. Think about it. If you're hoping for something, part of your attention is on that hope. You're imagining how good it will feel. You're emotionally invested in a particular outcome. But if you're focused on the work itself, on understanding the problem, on doing the work well, then you have all of your attention available for the work. And better work comes from better attention. Here's something else I want you to understand. There's a real danger in false hope. If you have hope for something that's not going to happen, you're setting yourself up for disappointment and pain. And that pain could actually prevent you from doing what you need to do. Let me give you an example. Suppose someone has a disease and the standard treatment has very low success rates. If they have hope that the standard treatment will cure them and it doesn't, then they might not explore other options until it's too late. But if they're realistic about the odds, if they acknowledge that the standard treatment probably won't work, then they might seek out experimental treatments earlier, or they might make different choices about how they want to spend their remaining time. Being honest about the reality can actually lead to better decisions. This is why I think science is so important. Science is fundamentally based on not fooling yourself, on testing your ideas against reality, on being willing to be wrong. And the opposite of that is hope. Hope is willing yourself to believe something despite the lack of evidence. Hope is ignoring evidence. Hope is fooling yourself. But wait, I want to be careful here because I don't want to say that optimism is bad. There's a difference between hope and what I would call a commitment to improvement. You can acknowledge that things are bad right now. You can be realistic about the current situation and still be committed to making them better. That's not hope. That's not a feeling. That's a decision. That's a choice you make about what you're going to do with your time and energy. And I actually think that's a much more powerful force than hope. When someone is committed to something, when they've decided that they're going to work on it, that they're going to keep trying even when it's difficult, that's powerful. That's what actually changes the world. That's what actually solves problems. And you don't need hope to have that. You just need to decide that something matters to you. Let me tell you about freedom for a moment, because I think hope actually takes away your freedom. Think about it. If you're always hoping for something, if you're always imagining how good it would be if this particular thing happened, then you're trapped in that imagination. You can't imagine other possibilities. You can't imagine other futures that might actually be better than the one you're hoping for, but that you hadn't thought of. You're trapped by your hope. But if you let go of hope, if you say, I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm not going to imagine one particular outcome, then you're free. You can be present with reality as it is. You can respond flexibly to what actually happens. You can see opportunities you wouldn't have seen if you were focused on your hope for outcome. This is connected to something I think is really important about how to live. When you're hoping for something, part of you is always unsatisfied. Part of you is always saying, this isn't good enough. I'll be happy when. But when you're not hoping, when you're just focused on what you're doing right now, on the work itself, on the people you're with, on the interesting problem you're solving, then you can actually be satisfied. You can actually enjoy what you're doing. You're not always postponing your life to some imaginary future. You know, I've tried to live that way. I've tried to do work that interested me and not worry too much about where it was going to lead. I've tried to be curious about the world, about nature, about people, about all kinds of things. And I've tried not to hope for particular outcomes, but just to do the work and see what happens. And I found that life is much more interesting that way. But I know most people don't live that way. Most people are taught to hope. From childhood, we're told to hope for good things. We're told that hope is virtuous. We're told that if you don't have hope, something is wrong with you, that you're cynical or depressed. But I think that's backwards. I think if you're always hoping for something, something is wrong, not with you, but with how you're approaching life. Here's what I think we should do instead. We should ask questions about what we actually want to accomplish. We should look at what's real right now. We should figure out what we can actually do, given the constraints of reality. And then we should do it. And as we work, we'll learn things. We'll make discoveries. We'll find that some things work and other things don't. And we'll adjust. We'll try new approaches. We'll improve. And maybe, just maybe, The world will get a little bit better because of what we do. But that's going to happen because of the work, not because of the hope. The hope is just you fooling yourself, feeling a little bit better today. But the work is real. The work is what actually connects to reality and actually changes things. So, to come back to where I started, why do I think hope is pointless? Because it doesn't connect to reality. Because it makes you feel good without requiring you to do anything. Because it can actually distract you from doing the real work that matters. Because it can make you passive instead of active. And because there's something much better you can do with your mind and your time and your energy. You can actually engage with reality. You can ask real questions. You can do real work. You can become someone who actually changes the world, instead of someone who just imagines that the world will change. I don't know what the future holds. None of us do. But I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep being curious. I'm going to keep asking questions. I'm going to keep trying to understand how things work. I'm going to keep doing work that matters to me. And I'm not going to hope that things work out. I'm just going to do the work and see what happens. And I find that much more interesting, much more honest, and much more powerful than hope. That's what I think about hope. Hope is pointless. But doing something, that's the whole point of life. Share.